My name is Richard Schwartz. I have a business in town called Dream Travel. I also drive the tour trolley, have done that for 14 years or so. And I've been a member of the temple for 24 years. Served on the board along with my late wife many, many years. It's hard to remember how many years. But I was on the building committee. I was the financial officer responsible for building this building here in Stafford County. Sometimes they ask, well, what was the history and why did we move here? Back, about 15 years ago, it was determined that the old building, which is just off of Kenmore in downtown Fredericksburg, was just way too small, and options went all over the place as to what we could do and build next door and all that. However, finally, Carl Silver donated the land that we are on now. I don't know, about 12 years ago. And about 10, 11 years ago, the building was being built here, and it was imagined to be able to handle the growth of the building for at least 10 years. It has now gotten to the point where it's really not big enough. We're stumbling over one another to satisfy all of the concerns of the various members of the temple. We are, of course, the only Jewish establishment in a 30-mile radius, so we have to serve a whole diversity of people here in our temple. The temple was designed, and of course, as always, there was a lot of controversy about what goes into the temple, but we got it built and moved in and sold the other building, which is still standing in downtown Fredericksburg as a Korean church. The building, I guess, serves quite well. It has a beautiful architecture, a synagogue, a sanctuary, which is probably not much bigger than it was back in the old days, but we now have a very good social hall and classrooms for our kids. Oh, well, at one point I was even president of the temple. I was on the board as a financial officer, administrative VP for years. And today I am the head of the what is called the Savvy Senior Group, and that's for us mature adults. Oh, well, all sorts of things. We, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we went down to Baltimore to see the Jewish Museum there, plus the historic synagogue that they have down there. That's that synagogue we want. Number of us mature adults wanted to see that building because it is the third oldest synagogue in the United States, and was so we had to see it. And then for example, there's we're related to the JCC in Fairfax, and we go to see them. For example, they have a film festival going on next week. Some of our members are going to that, and interestingly enough, I'm going to be doing a trolley tour for the temple in June, which will concentrate a little bit on the history of the Jewish congregation here in Fredericksburg going back into the 1930s. So. Well, if you want to go back to 1930s, there's the first Jews to come here in any number were from Germany, and that goes back to the 1930s. Then after a period of time, and they were very conservative. The ones that followed that were from Russia. Of course, they were having pogroms or whatever, and people were leaving the Russian Empire back then. And two different types of people. They were very Orthodox, and eventually they were able to come together and build a congregation around 1936. Built a building about 1940, which is still standing, as I mentioned earlier, down there. And the congregation back then went from 30 to 60 people. And today, of course, the congregation is around 130. What we call units, because some of them are families and some of them are singles, like me. Well, I don't know. We had a bit of controversy because obviously there were people who wanted to stay in downtown Fredericksburg because, that was the center of the congregation at the time. But eventually it really didn't change that much. Oh, that's a hard question. They do a lot of things, we have an outreach committee that works with the food bank. There's things like we when we have a full-time rabbi, which will happen next year, participate with all of the congregations, various religious congregations, in common things like the religious liberties march, and then we had something that took place on Holocaust remembrance when all the congregations come together down in Market Square. So we participate in all of those sort of things. Oh, I guess my kids here at the temple and working, it's interesting to see all the kids grow up. I now have a grandson here in the temple. He's the head of the youth group, and so it's as my kids grow, that's an interesting thing. And my granddaughter is now here, just a typical teenager.